Hello, everyone. My name is Luke Grable. I work for Directions Credit Union as a community outreach and education coordinator. So, a part of my job is teaching financial literacy. Specifically, I teach high school students and college students career readiness skills such as budgeting, savings, how to buy a car, all sorts of things that they may not get in their traditional high school curriculum. So, I'm kind of the person that's like, let's be an adult today. So, a part of what I see and do is just teaching people how to find financial bliss, which I will just be the first person to say that that is a completely subjective term because financial bliss is all dependent on what you want your lifestyle to look like. So, first and foremost, financial well being, financial bliss is something that is just dependent on who you are. Now, my background specifically is in psychology. So I have a bachelor's degree in psychology from Lord's University. I'm also an accredited financial and credit counselor. So that is a part of what I do, and a Bridges Out of Poverty trainer. Now, with all that education and with the people that I work with, it's really trying to get down to the nitty gritty of what they want their ideal lifestyle to look like. Now, depending on who you're working with, that could be, living in a really nice house or having a nice car or just being able to make it week by week. So, figuring out what those end goals are really helps to give us tangible milestones, which we can then use to create a plan. So, I call it the B word in my classes, but budgeting is not that scary after all. Because when we decide, what are those end goals, we can start to budget it and figure out, maybe I can save some money here, or I can start not spending money here, because, there's always that catch 22. Now, additionally, something to realize is that not all of us are just financially dependent or independent, I should say. We rely on a lot of different people in our lives, whether that is a partner or a spouse. If you have children in the mix, I personally have six. So there are lots of different variables that play into what your financial wellness journey looks like. And again, it's completely tailored to you. So whether that's you have parents that watch your kids instead of having a daycare, or not having a car payment, which is fantastic, you have different resources that are available to you that you may not realize that other people don't. So for me personally, didn't have someone to watch my kids for free, which would be nice considering there's six of them. However, a good resource that me and my wife have is we have a good friend that watches them. That's much cheaper than a daycare agency. So finding those different resources, those people, sometimes financial wellness is just knowing the right people, and that's a big key. Now, there are different ways that we can figure out budgeting. That can be either using your phone, you can use an Excel spreadsheet if you're really into that kind of stuff. But it has to be whatever's most comfortable for you. Now, I use my phone. And because I am in a relationship with my wife, we like it that way. We talk about our finances and we talk about, we have this coming up, or we have, this cheer competition to pay for. So, other than the people in your life, it's about also how you're communicating your financial needs and wants with other people in your life. So, say for instance, we want to go on a vacation. It's a good idea, right? Especially when it's nice and summery and hot and with children, if you have any. Um, but figuring out whatever that goal is. So whether that's taking a short trip, we just went to Dayton actually for a little quick weekend trip. And fun fact, there's a museum there. I think it's Air and Space Museum. Correct me if I'm wrong. Completely free, and a fantastic place to go for a family or as a couple or as a single person. So finding those different options versus, going to some trampoline park that costs, $25 per kid, which is insane. But that is just something that you have to work with. So we were able to create fun that way. Now, something I also talk about with my students is that money is an intermediary. So money can create happiness, or in today's discussion, bliss. Because it is an intermediary, that means that if I spend it on something, typically I feel something right afterwards. So whether I get a sandwich and that fills my stomach, fills my heart a little bit too, because, I don't feel that hunger for a little bit. So you have to start to think about money more than just a need, but also something that helps to encourage those emotional connections within ourselves. So when my students, I'm talking to them about it, they always want kind of elaborate lifestyles, which is fine by them, and I don't discourage it. But they also have to realize is sometimes people that have the largest amount of money can also feel really, really sad and lonely, because going back to our relationship side of things, we have to have those connections to build upon, the financial side of things. I mean, we can have both in a perfect world, but it is always good to have people that are going to help support those dreams and missions. So that is a big thing, and a big proponent of that. Or I'm a big proponent of just teaching that to people, that money is that emotional connection to your items. Like, think about the item that you value the most, and it may not be something that you bought necessarily. For me, it's quirky enough, but one of my favorite items is this water bottle that my wife gave me. And it has just a bunch of stickers that remind me of my family, and my kids, and even some of my students. So it's those things, that connection to something that, cost me maybe $25, and the stickers included.
I love that. I love how you're explaining this in a way that I haven't heard it explained before too, with between the relationship pieces and that connection piece, that emotional piece with money. Because I've heard it said, like, if you were to look at somebody's bank record, you can kind of see what they value. So
Mm-hmm.
kind of building on that connectional piece, or what's important to you, looking
Mm-hmm.
back and reflecting on that. I think that's really a neat
Yeah.
insight on that. So thank you.
I try. I get really deep with some of my students too, because we talk about like love languages, and sometimes, unfortunately, money is so intertwined with our love languages. I had this one student once that he was a football player for a small town school, and admittedly mentioned that he would prefer love over money, because it's an exercise I do with them. I have the students split. I have them choose whether they would live a life full of love or a life full of money. And there's always a decent split, but this guy adamantly was on team love, and I asked him why. And it's because his parents didn't show up to games. His parents were not actively involved, but his family was well off. And so he preferred and wanted that deep longing. Um, I also joke with my students that our mommy and daddy issues lead to a lot of financial turmoil in life. Um, an example of that would be, in my family. My dad is a huge Volkswagen fan for no reason whatsoever. And it came time for one of my sisters to get a car, and they got a Volkswagen. And it was one of those things that I could tell, it was one of those like, but look, I got something that, now we have that connection. But it's just silly how we put value in those things because of what other people have taught us. So it's just a very interesting relationship we have with money and then with other people.
So it is, interesting. I think sometimes that perspective that we have with finances can come from some of those things that we may believe that may not even be true. If I were to have all this money, I'd be really happy. But when you have somebody that has all of that, they can tell
Mhm.
you, that's not necessarily the case. So
Yes, indeed. And it's so interesting how we can target young people. So, like, marketing is a huge factor into financial literacy. Um, think about it from this angle, okay? College, so expensive. But for the last, say, 15, 20 years, college has been pushed extremely on younger people for career development. However, the conversation wasn't about student loan debt. And now, 20 years into the future, we are, and we're in this epidemic of there's so many people that can't get jobs, or even if they have a job that pays well, their student loan debt is so extreme that they may have to not start a family or have to wait even longer to start a family, not be able to buy a home. So that is a huge thing that I'm seeing. And the generation that I'm teaching now sees a lot of this millennial drama of they went to college, they took out all these loans because it was an attractive thing, like college was cool. Um, but now they see it as like, I don't want to be in debt. Especially, there's a lot of mental trauma that happened with COVID and the pandemic, and seeing students really kind of fearful of getting out there in the world because the world shut down. And they experienced it at such an important age. Specifically, high schoolers. I'm seeing a lot of them just really not know where to go in life because during COVID, it was food workers and the people in the medical field. Like those were the most important people. And so them understanding different careers and opportunities really like affected them grossly. Um, and so we're trying to go through this process now of letting them know, the career world is not as scary as it may have looked during those couple of years. Like that doesn't happen normally. Um, but yeah, it's wild to see how that works out.
Any other insights that you have that would help people better understand, whether it be with the college population and high school population that you work with, or even those that you've gone through that bridges out of poverty training that may
Mhm.
give some kind of background?
So one thing that I see a lot is people prejudge what they think they know about people in poverty, students these days. And it's very hard because we take our own thoughts and opinions that we saw growing up, and typically those ideas are formalized at age like 5, 6, and 7, which I don't trust my 7-year old. So I love her to death, but I would not trust her to judge an audience. um, but we're taking preconceived notions and whitewashing it on large groups of people. So poverty, for example, some people are rooted in generational poverty, which means that they are typically the third in their family line. So grandmother, mother, then them, or father, grandfather, whatever it may be. And that is their lived experience, is living in poverty. And so trying to get out of the grips of poverty is just incredibly hard because they understand how the systems of poverty work, whether that's welfare, that's child support, um, food stamps, those different types of things. They understand that reality. And being able to jump into another class can be very difficult. Specifically, those that are in poverty that are receiving benefits, say if they earn a penny more a year, they could lose all benefits, and that could severely affect, their ability to pay for childcare, their ability to pay for rent. Um, and so some people just don't understand how deep that is. So being able to jump, it takes a lot of resources available to them, whether that's transportation, whether that's family. There are, I believe, in the Bridges Out of Poverty framework, 12 different resources available that we can use. Those can include spiritual, so if they have a church or a faith base to help them out, having food resources. huge need. Even having the language ability or understanding how people in middle class or business class, anything like that, talk to one another. Um, so, being in poverty, sometimes you have to learn something called code switching, which is being able to speak frank with the people in your group versus being able to speak with others that are at a quote unquote upper level. This is something I actually practice with my students is I talk a lot of the time in their language and their verbiage, but then I'll switch it up so that they understand that I'm also a professional at the same time. uh, for the students, the preconceived notions that I'm seeing are students are lazy. They don't want to work. They don't desire to have a job. They want to live in their parents' basements. And honestly, that's been something that has been told to millennials for years. I think, unfortunately, Gen Z is just kind of being tagged along with the group. Um, but I think from what I see is there are a lot of good students out there, and a lot of them are excited for what the world has to offer. I just think sometimes it's very overwhelming. And you also have to think that high school is very different than what it's been like for the last 10, 20 years. A lot of students, their classes, their class load is just pretty insane sometimes. Um, and the amount of drama that they have to go through, the amount of school shootings that have gone on, there are just a lot of things that weigh so heavily at that age group, plus puberty, plus adding so many different emotional layers that it can be very troubling. And also, we can't exactly blame them because they learn everything from their parents and guardians, which is a fun topic for another day. No, but it is. We all learn habits and the way that we treat others from the people in our lives. So, as easy as it would be to blame the younger generation for how they act, for how they speak, they learned it from somewhere. It has to be from somewhere. They did not just wake up one day and start acting that way.
Very true. Great point. Um, Anything that like stands out to you when you're working with youth that maybe like those aha moments they have, or I wish I would have known this, or even the changes that we have today in kind of a cashless society that youth are needing to kind of learn that, again, it's not a easy swipe of the credit card. It does run out. It's not a magic tool. So
Mm.
any of those kind of insights?
Yes. So statistically, there was a Brown University study done a couple years back that said financial habits are stabilized or understood basically from age 7 to 11. So when I'm teaching them at high school level, they already have their preconceived notions about how money works. Now, since the generation I'm working with has only been subject to debit, credit cards, pay machines, basically, they haven't gone through the process of really seeing a lot of physical cash in their life. So for them to understand, you go to the store with $100 and you only have $100 to spend is totally different than, them seeing their parents or guardians going up and just swiping. Okay. So when we have that physical cash, it creates a barrier for us, which can create some safety because we only know I have this much money. Whereas the financial institutions, if I am trying to spend $150 and I only have 100 on my account, sometimes they'll let you go past those boundaries. So that's something that I try to work with them on is, making sure you're checking your statements, your balance. Thankfully, we have online banking, so you can look at it before you pay, because we are very much not in a cash society anymore. I was at Kalahari the other day, and they had little booths where you could get sandwiches and whatnot at a competition we were at. And it said that they had gone cashless, and I was like, are you kidding me? Like I was kind of shocked because I would have thought, small vendor, they would accept cash. No, not at all. My family, we went to Disney a year ago. Yeah, a year ago. And it was completely cashless for all their little vendor booths as well. So if you wanted to get a Mickey shaped pretzel, you had to have money on your phone or on your card and pay that way. Um, so it's just a wild thought. And thinking about it, my kids age range in age from 7 to 6 months. And so me thinking about how to actively talk to them about how money works in today's society, it's a little bit daunting because it's hard for them to see what's on the other side and be like, oh, mommy and daddy have money. So so yes, hopefully that answers that question.
No, absolutely. And I love that you're modeling that communication to your children as far as that being such an important piece for you and your wife. Because I do read statistics as well that money tends to be one of the reasons why marriages will end,
Yes.
because of financial issues. So I think kind of any insights on that as far as that you've come along, the importance of that communication piece?
And communication in couples about money, so important. Now we also, again, talking about family issues that comes into our financial issues. We learn so much from our parents, and then you get in a relationship with someone and you're bringing that financial emotional baggage can cause so many issues. So for example, friends of ours, husband, huge saver, loves it. Wife, big spender. Okay. When they get in a relationship, we see how things kind of go that way because one is accustomed to one lifestyle, whereas the other is accustomed to another lifestyle. So there is a lot of, trying to find a middle ground. For my wife and I, as an example, my family, we were part of situational poverty for quite some time when I was a kid. So my parents would go paycheck to paycheck for a while. And my wife, very middle class family. Like for her, like they did stuff as a family. She was in cheer, or not in cheer, and she was in dance all of her life. So she was accustomed to a certain lifestyle. So when we got together, I was very much like, we're going to go on every free date that's possible. We are going to be splitting the bill. No. But it was very much kind of a culture shock for me when we got married because then we put together our money and she was just like, why aren't we spending money on certain things? And I'm like, well, we don't need it, obviously, because I came from that mindset of we only get it if we absolutely need it. Like I'm very good at being resourceful, and I pride myself on that. But my wife is just like, stop being a dummy and buy it on Amazon, which is the answer to a lot of couples issues is just buy it on Amazon. So that is just something that I've seen a lot of is typically one is the spender and one is the saver, and then trying to find some middle ground. There is such things as financial infidelity, which means that you're cheating on your spouse by spending money that you shouldn't or getting out credit cards in your name that you probably shouldn't. And those are serious instances that people should definitely see a financial counselor for, and maybe just like a regular counselor as well. Because again, typically those things are related to deeper seated issues that we kind of have to resolve in life.
I think that's the beauty of when you look at a marriage of two people coming together. My husband and I used to do kind of like a marriage counseling for people who were ready to get married, to think
Mm-hmm.
about all of those things. Like you said, like you're bringing in what you learned from your family and he's bringing in what he learned from his family, and it's meshing, and maybe not so much always meshing, but really kind of that aha moment of that, and how communication is so important. And that perception of money can sometimes be a beautiful balance that we can have it, even looking at like a saver versus a spender. And I've heard that with understanding poverty is that sometimes people who have had generational poverty, because of the situations they've been in, they look at money as not something that they can trust is going to be there. So when it is there, they want to spend it on something fun and use it before it gets taken away from them.
Mhm.
Kind of is that accurate?
Feast and famine cycles is like whenever you're in a famine, you don't know when food is going to come next. So when the food comes, you feast on it because you want as much of it inside of you. So as much joy. So think about the emotional side of things. How much joy are they going to get out of that financial moment? There was an example in our Bridges Out of Poverty training where this family, people had raised money for them. It was like maybe $500 for these students so that they could get new clothes for school because they were coming in basically wearing the same clothes. And they expected them, we were going to give them this money. They're going to go get new clothes. It's going to be fine. But then they came back and they went on a vacation. And people just didn't understand that. But it's called tyranny of the moment, and Bridges Out of Poverty, which is a part of, you do things in the moment because of what is most important. And when that money comes in, it's kind of like, okay, all hands off. We're going to go and do this. At a financial institution, when I worked as a teller and a back office person, tax time came, and there's a lot of stigmas around that. But people get money and they haven't had that money maybe in quite some time, and they're ready to spend it. They've been waiting on projects or other things that they really want to do. So it's important to take those things with grace and understanding, because we don't understand what that's life or what their life is like, because we may have those things naturally.
I think when we can kind of understand that, it can help us maybe build a little bit more of that unity from class to class and kind of understanding with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there are just a bunch of prejudgments on what is poverty, what is middle class, what is extreme wealth, and typically in extreme wealth, just to clarify, that's typically the like top 1% that we're talking about. And being a part of that class comes with its own struggles. Obviously, I have not experienced those, but there is a lot of perfectionism that is accepted at that class, where you have to look the type, you have to have the right kind of cars, you have to live in the right kind of place, you have to have all these different variables to keep your social status, basically. So that's something that, when we're watching Keeping Up with the Kardashians, we may not consider, but, their whole lifestyle is on display for all to see, which I personally would not want by any means whatsoever. I'm very comfortable living the lifestyle that I'm in without cameras. So that is something I agree we have to consider, is regardless, people all have their demons that they fight with.
And I have heard that said that people that fall into that 1% are sometimes constantly caught up in fear of like, I got to keep gathering more because it could run out, which in our minds and our perspective, when we're not a part of that class, it just seems like you have endless supply. You have none of that fear. So, and on the flip side, I used to tell my students too, like those that may consider themselves to be in the lower economic class here in the United States, that perspective piece of in other countries, like you still have a lot to be thankful for, even though you may not have the name brand shoes you may want or whatever the case may be, because we can always, get caught up in that comparison game. If we have our needs met, then we really can kind of step back and be thankful for what we do have. So sometimes I try to keep that perspective in mind, even myself, as we're going through things of like, there's a price to be paid, if you will, right?
Yes, indeed. And it's so much of us not knowing what is behind closed doors. I know I'm not a social media person. I do not have any social media presence whatsoever. But I remember when I had it, and it was constantly comparing my lifestyle to those that were in my class when I was in high school, and thinking about, they went to college without getting student loan debt, or, they got a job right outside of college, and are making this amount of money, or they're driving this kind of car. And there's so much comparison there that is toxic, because we will just completely diminish any successes that we've created because we see someone else with something quote unquote greater. So a part of our like financial bliss is being happy with what we have, even though it's never going to be perfect. And I think that's the misconception people have, is that bliss equals perfection, and it's not. It's just being comfortable and happy with where we are in life. So that's a big thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think of it connecting with like a car. When you mentioned the bliss of not having a car payment, it's like some of us would love to have that newer vehicle, but if we're driving that older vehicle, the trade-off being that we don't have a car payment, you know? So like what's the cost of, you know, what
Yeah.
what you're looking for? Kind of
Yes.
seeing that.
Yes. I laugh, except especially because we have an 8-seater van. So if we're doing the math, 6 kids plus me and my wife equals, we're maxed out in our van. And my daughter, she keeps on asking me, she's like, when are we getting a bigger van? And I was like, honey, interest rates are terrible right now. So like, even if we wanted to, I would not dare get a van because the interest rates are so high. Um, so it's like trying to teach her those kind of things a little bit at the time. But I know in her like 7-year-old mind, she's just like, I'm the only daughter of 6 kids, and there's 5 boys, and I'm stuck in the back and they stink. And meanwhile, I'm like being practical dad over here, and I'm like, yeah, we can't get a new van yet. So you're going to have to hold off on that one, honey bun.
I think that's a beautiful lesson you're teaching her, though.
Yes.
That's reality. It's like,
Yes, exactly. I'm like, sorry, you get your room to yourself. So congrats.
yeah, that's a big thing to have that many children and get her own room.
Right. Indeed. She should be thankful for those things. She should hear this financial bliss talk.
All right. Anything else that comes to mind that you think would be great information to add in?
I think the only thing I would add is that if anyone is ever, needing to talk to someone about what they want to do financially, I work for a credit union. There are a lot of credit union professionals out there that are certified as financial counselors, or even depending on where you live, there are a lot of resources available to you. So I know in Toledo, which is where I come from, they have the eBite Center, which is downtown, where they have financial counselors there to help people out. So just having that person to talk to about what financial struggles you may have, they may be able to then point out whatever financial strengths you do have, and then be able to build on those things. Because sometimes we just need to, let it out and let ourselves feel less isolated, because you never know. There's always someone out there that may have the same lived experience as you in some way, and they may be on the other side of it, and may be able to help you get to that next step, whether that may be, retirement, or getting a better job, or whatever it may be. Some people, they may need one session. Some people may not. At the credit union, as long as you're a member, it's free for you to just chat it out with someone. I recommend knowing what your income is monthly, and then figuring out whatever debts you have. So if you have utility bills, car payments, house payments, those kind of things, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that you are financially well, because if you're financially well, that means that'll be reciprocated into our community. In regards to the eBite Center in Toledo, I'm pretty positive it's a free resource for people. You would have to contact them directly, but they are a fantastic group and are really helping the people that live where we're at. We have a resource called Finances 101. We use it for teens and adults, and it's just free educational material that they can use to learn about different financial habits. And it's based on being a healthy skeptic. So basically teaching people how to feel emotionally when it comes to, something that may be new to them or even buying a car. I go over in my classes a lot about, the tricks to buying a car because you get tricked when you're trying to buy a car. So it's definitely a great resource. We have all sorts of stuff on our financial literacy page, and I'm mid creating a podcast as well. So I'll send you that stuff once it's fully done.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much. You did such a great job and you're so well spoken. I'm grateful that the kids have you and the adults have you. You have so much to offer to them. So thank you for all that you do. It's exciting to see where this can go. So thank you for being a part of it.
No problem. Thank you, Janine.
You're welcome. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.